Hi guys, this is Chacruna and Yoloswaggins once again, and today we are going to have a spotlight on Stan Cifka. The theme is how to build decks like a pro,
Oh
and
yeah,
today, yeah, our main theme is going to be something related to consistency in deck building,
exactly.
because we see a lot of it in Cifka's builds.
Exactly, because Stanislav Cifka is an old Magic the Gathering pro player, and
Yeah.
that's fundamental in deck building. That you see a lot in Magic players deck building.
Certainly, and I believe he's also a very highly rated chess player. I think he's like some 2400, 2500
Yes,
chess
yes,
player
that
rated.
is correct.
So,
Yeah,
like, you can actually kind of see that in the things he prefers. Like, he prefers a lot of the like logical puzzle type decks where he can lock people out of the game,
mm,
where he can really have really build good advantages from planning 2 or 3 turns into the future.
exactly. So that's why we are looking at him today because he's really a very interesting player. And let's just start at the first deck here. This is a priest list that he used in the China versus Europe season 2 qualifier. Um, and let's just talk really quickly about consistency because I think this deck really shows a lot about what consistency really is. Like right now, it's just this buzzword that we're using, but it
Certainly.
there are three ways to get something to get a deck to be more consistent,
Yeah.
and one of them is having a lot of two ofs. So a lot of number twos here.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit about why that's good?
Exactly. It means you're going to draw, for instance, Wild Pyromancer in more games if you have two of them instead of one. So you assumedly put Pyromancer in your deck because you think it's a good card. Um, and therefore you want to maximize your chance of drawing it. Um, and one way to do this is having the maximum number of copies. So if you sort of want to maximize your chances of drawing the um, important piece of the puzzle. And one way is having multiples. Another way is through card draw. And this deck has some card draw too in the Northshire Cleric, um, which also helps you to get to
Power
those
Word Shield is
pieces.
also a fairly nice portable
That's
cycle.
true. Yeah, so it has those four cards for
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
a,
cycling through the deck a little bit. And then another thing about consistency is also having cheap stuff. Um, because if you say you only put a lot of cards like Deathwing and other expensive cards in your deck, you're not going to be able to actually do anything consistently.
yeah.
Um, so that's another thing. And this deck really shows all of this. It has a card draw, it has a lot of two offs, and it has really cheap spells or really cheap stuff. Like I actually counted it up, and the average mana cost of this deck is 2.5 mana.
Oh wow, that's yeah, that's really surprising. But I
Yeah.
can kind of see that running down the list once more.
Mm.
Just quickly, I want to touch on one thing where people might say, okay, you want consistency, but something like Thought Steal actually probably is the most varied card in the game in terms of the outcomes it can give.
Hmm.
So, how do you think that fits in with his game plan here? What's Thought Steal there for?
Well, Thought is a powerful card, and another thing with this exact type of deck list is that you're going to have games where you run out of cards because you try to get into a position where you take over control of the game,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you do that by kind of vomiting cards out and so having a lot of cheap things that
Yeah,
you
so
can
you
do.
empty your hand. In the
Exactly.
average mana cost of this deck
And
is
then
quite low, so it's
exactly.
quite
So then you need Thoughtsteel and Northshire Clerics to
I
kind
see.
of keep you going.
Yeah.
And having two Thoughtsteels, you're right that it's kind of a weird card in the sense that it will give you some really random stuff, but you will draw it often, and it's a powerful card. So that's kind of the idea behind that.
That's fair. So the idea behind Thought Steal, I guess, is to draw, like, even though it doesn't consistently give you some specific cards, it does consistently give you more mana to play in your hand. Is that the sort of thing?
Exactly. That's kind of the idea behind
that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. So it's just to keep you from running out of steam. It's good stuff.
And there are, like, I know Cifka has changed his pre-stake a little bit from this. Double silence is probably not where you want to go, but for this purpose, it kind of serves the idea of showing that
it's fine. This was back in January or February, right?
Exactly.
When he was first coming to prominence, and it was a very aggro-intensive meta, and the double silence was very, very good against stuff like. Was this before the Undertaker nerf? Because then I can totally see the double silence, because Pyromancer totally shuts out aggro hunter and that sort of stuff with double silence.
It could have been. I'm not entirely sure, actually.
Yeah, I think it's around the time, just before, just after, anyway.
It's
but
somewhere
a
around
lot
that
of
time.
Hunter was popular, or Mech Mage was popular, and the silence sort of stuff. Cheap spells and pyro, it generally works quite well against.
Exactly. Back then, I played a little bit with this deck list, and I did extremely well with it, but it was also extremely difficult to play it.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next deck. So this Hunter right here is from Via Game House Cup number 3, so that's a lot newer. And that's just it's a face hunter. But what's interesting about this face hunter is that, again, it has a lot of the 2Fs, but most face hunters do, though. And it also has the added double 1-drop in the South Sea deckhand. So in a sense, it has even more 2Fs than normal
and it
face
caps
hunters.
out at 3. It's
Yeah.
pretty standard. Like, I don't know, some hunters might run some 4 mana stuff. Leroy is not 4 anymore, is it? But they might run Leroy or something higher, 5 mana cap.
Yeah. And then I also like that the one-offs that he has, like, we're not going to talk about the traps right now, but the one Unleash, one Haunted Creeper, I think is really interesting, because only having one of these 2 cards will actually add to the consistency of the Face Hunter plan, because what you're trying to do with Face Hunter is kill them, and Unleash and Haunted Creeper, if you draw them at the wrong time in the game, can really screw up that plan. So I like that those are the cards that he chooses to run one of, because they are powerful cards in the right situation, but at the wrong time they can really clog up your hand or do nothing.
That's a really, really good point, actually. So if we look at it from the point of view of playing the game, and whereas in the last deck its purpose was to subvert aggro mainly, and to basically win out in the mid game. It was a mid-rangey sort of deck. So it benefited from having a very low mana curve with some good finishes and with some Thought Steals and things like that to keep you with a little bit of fuel. This deck depends a lot on the average damage you draw on every possible card. So things like Haunted Creeper and Unleash, there are situations, or the Snake Trap even, though it's a little bit more ambiguous in the case of the trap. Like, these things don't always give you damage whenever you draw them, whereas the 2-offs are all heavily damaging cards. They all do at least 2 damage as far as I can see, other than the Animal Companion or Knife Juggler, which are pretty stable and which are pretty versatile cards.
Exactly. And so another thing that's interesting to me is the choice of the 1/1 trap split, because to some extent that actually adds consistency when we are looking at a card like the Mad Scientist.
Yes,
it will consistently pull traps even though you already have 1 active.
That's very good, actually. That's if he's I could quite easily see somebody like him doing this, and it makes a lot of sense, because in a lot of your best draws, you are ditching. You might ditch 3 and keep a scientist, and you'll get another scientist, but you can't go coin scientist and scientist, because if he kills both, then you only get 1 trap. So it's actually really making sure that you win in those turns when you have a above average draw, and both your scientists proc, and that is actually a really good point on the consistency. So
Exactly.
really, really subtle point that he's thought of. I hadn't thought of it before you mentioned it.
Exactly. So the snake trap, the 1/1 split, I actually think that adds to the consistency. Though I think explosive trap is a little bit better
Better
than snake
usually,
trap.
yes,
Usually.
certainly.
Anyways, then there's this weird paladin list, also from the VIA game, House Cup number 3. And the interesting thing about that is you see also sometimes that Cifka will play 2 very situational answers,
Yes.
like double Kiss and Mystic, for instance.
Yeah, that is certainly very strange.
Yeah, and also double heal, but double Guardian of Kings. So that's kind of interesting about that, but I don't think there's too much else to talk about in this list.
No, it's all pretty standard other than that. But let's talk about those things. They're pretty cool because I imagine this is to polarize the list to very, very consistently beat a certain couple of decks, like maybe Freeze Mage or something like that.
Yes, I think Freeze Mage was big just around that time, as well as some hunters, like I think Face Hunter.
Yeah, it would do fine against Face Hunter as well with the Monster and Shield
exactly,
bot.
because this list. Exactly. This list
double
looks
chow,
to me,
yeah.
we're talking at the same time right now, but this list looks to me that it's meant to counter specifically Face Hunter and Freeze Mage because of the insane amounts of heal and the double Kiss and Mystic. But even then, the interesting thing is I don't think it will do too bad against most other things.
No, it won't, but it certainly won't do horrendously well against a good mid-late game deck.
Yeah, like what I'm a little bit scared of is against some control decks to not have the equality, or maybe against druids to not have equality.
That's the thing. If they just keep putting down animals and then force roll you, all that heal isn't gonna ever be used.
Exactly. But it will be interesting to see how it plays out when we do a game.
Yeah, certainly.
Then we have a Patron Warrior, the deck everyone loves at the moment, or loves to hate.
It's brilliant.
So yeah, like once again we see a lot of 2Fs. Though that is kind of the norm again with Patron Warrior, which is
pretty standard.
Exactly, it's pretty standard, but it's also probably why the deck is so good.
Yeah, certainly. Like in general, just the standard build is so good because it's so much based on consistency.
Exactly. Like you have so insane card draw in Battle Rage.
Yeah, Battle Rage is huge.
Exactly, and you can get the card draw quite consistently with this deck, which and at the same time it's really cheap and has a lot of 2Fs, so it actually fulfills all our 3 elements of consistency. Anyways, I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. Let's go on to the Handlock, which is also interesting because here we again see that he's going double Big Game Hunter.
Yep.
Which I really like in Handlock because if you're playing Handlock, it's probably because Handlock is one of the best decks at that point in time.
Okay.
And then you want it to be good in the mirror.
Okay. Maybe. I'm unconvinced on that reasoning, but because, for instance, everybody else could just be playing things that Handlock beats, like Warrior, Control, or things like that, you know.
Yeah, but then...
But yeah, in that case, BGH comes in useful as well. So
or even in that case, you're still going to beat those decks that Handlock beats, even if you put double Big Game Hunter.
That's true.
And then if other people are countering those things too with Handlock, then you have the advantage there as well.
That's true. So you're sort of, your strategy is less exploitable by other people making the same switch.
Exactly.
Because of you doing this. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
All right. And then the next deck is a Cobble Druid. And this is a little bit different because, we still have a lot of 2Fs, but we do have a lot of tech as well in the Harrison Lothar.
Yeah, the Harry Jones is very strange. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a
you
pretty
know
standard
where
list,
he used this list?
Yeah, it was via game House Cup number
Okay,
3.
tournament list. Okay, yeah, then Harrison Jones probably does quite well.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's a pretty standard.
yeah, it's a very standard other than the Harrison Jones.
Yeah, and I think this type of combo druid is actually pretty standard, and I
Yeah,
really
exactly.
like
But
these
the
kind of lists that go a little bit greedy and go Ragnaros. I think that's a really good tech
yeah,
choice for the druid.
that's the thing. Although, like, one thing is, once again, this is quite. This is about 2 or maybe 3 cards different to an absolutely bog standard druid.
Mm.
And the thing is, like, this is so important because these decks, like that druid, this druid, and the Grim Patron Warrior, they were so dominant just because they're so consistent at drawing their win conditions. They're so consistent at drawing their removal that they have just overtaken the meta like this. So when you're building a new deck, it is very, very important to think how consistently can I draw my Force of Nature Sav draw, or things like that. How consistently can I draw the removal by the time I need? How consistently can I draw my win condition exactly when I need it?
Exactly, and I think this deck is kind of the perfect place for Ragnaros, because if you hit their face, then it's probably going to put them in range of combo, and
Yeah,
if it kills something, then you also find that.
exactly. Then you just win on value.
Then our last deck that we're going to look at this time.
Good old fatigue.
Oh yeah, and this is also from around January, back in the China versus Europe Season 2 qualifier. And again, we see a lot of 2Fs. In fact, there are only 2 1-offs, the Ice Barrier and the Big Game Hunter.
Yep.
And I guess you could even argue that the Ice Barrier is just maybe a third heal, and to some sense the Big Game Hunter
It's
is a third polymorph.
No, it's kind of the ice barrier also adds a lot to consistency because not having the ice barrier would mean that you're only running double duplicate, so you run into that secret problem again where both mad scientists.
Because we're not playing Mad Scientist, it's a fatigue deck, so we don't want to pull any cards out of our deck.
What's that? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
So
okay,
it's just
you
basically
could
a
argue
third
that
heal.
the ice barrier is kind of like a third heal.
Yeah.
Against minion-based decks, and the BGH is kind of
exactly.
like,
The thing is, it's kind of having the third polymorph kind of answer in the Big Game Hunter. It's kind of like having the third heal in the Ice Barrier, but not quite, because it's not like antique heal, but it's strictly better. But you would probably play 3 heal bots if that was an option.
I don't know. Like the 3 mana is pretty appealing. But
that's true. It is.
But I'd probably play the 3 heal bots maybe. But the thing is, like with the duplicates and the echoes, you usually get so many. Anyway.
Exactly. All right. So that's our review of Stanislav Cifka's decks. We will be doing 1 game for each, so look out for those as well.
See you in the ladders.
Yes.